Hearing what's coming out of the South African Investment Conference, does it build confidence in the direction the government is taking regarding building the economy and attracting investment in the country? Economist and former Statistician-General Dr Pali Lehohla joins us now to unpack and reflect on this. Dr. Lehohla, good evening, and thank you very much for your time.
Good evening, and let me make a correction. I am not an economist. I am former Statistician-General.
You're going to reflect today on the economy as the former Statistician General. So give us your economic analysis. Let's talk a little bit about what you are hearing coming out of this investment conference, right? Looking at the state of the economy, looking at the state of our energy supply, looking at the state of our policy environment, looking at the state of our safety and security, maybe one would also ask, looking at what's coming out of the July unrest reports, looking at law and order in the country. Did we advance a case for South Africa as an investment destination?
Well, let me try and frame the observations more like a statistician, as well as more like somebody who has been responsible for the numbers and observing them very carefully. We have had 24 quarters from 2016 to 2021 fourth quarter. That is, as we measure, that's what we have observed. Of these 24 quarters, 14 were negative in terms of gross fixed capital formation. And of course, by quarter four, it only grew by 1.9%. 10 were positive. In the last 14 quarters, within which the first investment conference was held, 10 of the quarters have actually been negative. And in gross fixed capital formation. Gross fixed capital formation tells you of how successful investments are. And we are heading for 1.2 trillion, of which 340 billion of what was previously pledged has been deployed. Now, the question is, do we see the deployment of those billions in the numbers? I would argue we don't. There is an expectation that there will be about 700 billion by the end of this conference in terms of either pledges or real money coming through. The question is, will that be enough? Will it move the needle? On the basis of the history of gross fixed capital formation, it suggests that we are not likely to be. Now, if you look at government final consumption expenditure, we see that it has actually been so minimal, at 2% growth, and for almost 7 quarters it was negative. So basically things are so lackluster that if promise is based on past experiences of the 4 or 3 conferences on investment, there's very little evidence that this will yield anything. Now bring all the other issues that we have put across, which is security, electricity, and if South Africa were to grow at about 3%, Eskom will collapse because it doesn't have capacity to execute the mission at the level of production of electricity it is. The Greens are not going to cut it. So basically, I think we are sold a lemon here.
Yeah. So if you're saying the current levels of investment have really not helped us with our growth deficit, what will if it's not investment?
Well, I'm not arguing against investment. I'm arguing that when we think about ambition, let us say what ambition will yield results. I don't think 1.2 trillion will yield the results we require. Neither the 340 billion that has now been deployed shown any results on the basis of gross fixed capital formation. And of course, businesses have a tendency to say that we are going to invest. And that's not new money, it's replacement of what exists. And when you replace what exists, you can't expect growth. So we need to look at these numbers very, very carefully so that we don't get disappointed. And I think that's what we have to understand in South Africa, that when politicians articulate certain things, let's ask them, what are the numbers supposed to deliver? Now, not the inputs. I mean, here we are just having a laundry list of inputs, 1.2 trillion. The question is, what will 1.2 trillion deliver? Will it deliver 4% growth, 5% growth? At the rate at which things are going since the first investment mission, no growth has been observed. I don't even think that COVID would have, even without COVID, one doesn't think, and the evidence is here, it doesn't show that it will happen.
Yeah. So do you think...
And I think that we should look at the numbers. I pray that we look at the evidence.
Yeah.
And then when the president steps out, he then talks from a point of evidence, from a platform of evidence, not a platform of hope.
So we hear the Minister of Trade and Industry saying that, I mean, of the 340 or so billion, it's only really 40 billion that we could say is really new money that has been pumped into the country. I mean, does that explain why those numbers are that dismal?
That is why when business says it will invest, you actually have to say what is new money, not just replacement. Because if you are just replacing, then when you replace a tire with a new tire, you are just replacing. But if you have a growing economy, or you aim for a growing economy, then you actually have to look at more ambitious goals and targets that will yield a particular growth path. And that it is that growth that we must actually target first. And then say, what is the desirable level of investment? And what would government contribute, and what would this contribute? So we must work from a plan that is very clear that if that plan is achieved, it will yield 5% growth. At the moment, we are just talking from a point of view of inputs, which is if we get 1.2 trillion, we will be better. But there's no evidence that we will be better because there's no plan that says so. So I appeal as a patriot and a statistician and who understands economics, that from the numbers, the evidence doesn't suggest that what is promised will actually happen. What we are promised is hope.
Now, when you look at the fact that some companies have reduced their initial pledged investment because of COVID-19 and other issues, of course, including some projects having already failed, if you really look at the investment that was made into the cell phone company, what does that tell us then about this plan of continuing to have these investment conferences?
Well, investment conferences are important. But if they are not in the context of a plan, that suggests what the impact will be. Because I think what has to be done by the president is to tell us what the impacts are from the plan. And then when he talks about the laundry list of inputs, then we say how far away are we from the plan? Because from a model-based process, those things can be articulated. I mean, we have to have a destination, a true north, a destination, and that destination must be assessed against this laundry list of inputs. There is no destination. That's the problem. And so we don't know where we are headed. So these big numbers called 1.2 trillion, it's a big number. Anybody will be fooled by it. It's a big number. It has several notes that you can't even count. But the fact of the matter is that those zeros behind the one number, whatever, actually have proven not to deliver what is expected, particularly because there are inventories in that. There are also replacements and no new money. So for heaven's sake, can we try to do something that is more meaningful?
Former Statistician-General Dr Pali Lehohla stays on with us. Let's take a break. We'll continue next and wrap up this conversation. You're back live with us tonight here on In Focus. Reflections on the South African Investment Conference that just closed and what it sets to achieve with the former Statistician-General Dr Pali Lehohla, looking purely at numbers and what we have achieved so far. So, Dr Lehohla, if we look at then the whole question of unlocking investment for growth and job creation, where do we begin? Where must we start so that the plan yields the required results?
Well, I mean, the plan will not automatically yield the desired results first we must work the plan and say what kind of growth will South Africa require to achieve certain objectives, and through what processes will that happen, and then say what levels of investment then will we need. I've looked at the 1.2 trillion. We have 340 billion that has now been deployed. We are saying that there are 700 billion that is yet to materialize towards cumulatively to 700 billion towards 1.2 trillion. In the evidence that we have, there is no evidence, or in the information that we have, there's no evidence that this thing is yielding anything. And there is no plan against which you can say, with this investment, we'll achieve so many jobs, we'll reduce poverty by so much, we'll reduce inequality by so much. There is none of that. So basically, if we approach this thing from inputs, such as if we have 1.2 trillion put in there, that's the wrong place to start. You've got to start from what are the objectives and what are the targets in those objectives. Yeah. And then you model those things and say, if this were there, what will happen? Then work off those targets. Yeah. At the moment, we are just looking at inputs. Anybody who comes in and says, well, I'll contribute this, it's like a stock fair. Yeah.
Sure. So what you're saying, at this particular point, we can't even say what 1.2 trillion will be able to get us.
We'll achieve. That's the problem. That's the problem. I mean, we are almost like attending a burial of a pauper, and everybody comes and says, I'll contribute so much. And this is not how you run a country or an economy as complex as one of South Africa. I mean, we need to have those targets which raise the hope and the eyes of South Africa to target at something. And then against that, you look at these inputs, this litany of inputs. And you don't even have to talk to it that much. You have actually to look at the targets and say, these are the targets I'm aiming for. Yeah. And I want South Africa to raise the gaze to those targets.
So some are saying what at least we have achieved is to, by evidence, suggest that South Africa is creating an attractive platform on which to do business.
Well, that is fine. And the promise of dealing with the energy, dealing with crime, dealing with that. But the evidence there, too, points the negative direction around crime, around energy, around... And ESCOM, whether ESCOM can actually look at when South Africa has a manufacturing capacity of about 90%, ESCOM will collapse. Because it cannot supply South Africa at manufacturing capacity of 90%. It couldn't run when it was Christmas, when industry was not functioning. Only households were consuming energy. And you can't rely on Greens at this moment. I mean, ESCOM, by its own admission, said the coal conveyor belt has a problem and they couldn't supply coal, and we have plenty of coal that can actually power this economy. But the management of all these things are so poor that, yes, perhaps we can be entertained by the laundry list of inputs. But I don't think we have the right starting point. Yeah. Actually, have to start from the targets from a model-based process.
Yeah, there's been a whole lot of talk about the rapid introduction of economic reforms. The president has been busy, for example, making sure that we introduce a new dispensation as far as energy capacity is concerned in the country, expansion plans. There's been talks of improvements of our port infrastructure. There's been a whole lot of talk of...
Well, those things are important. Those things have to happen. But when you add all those things up and say what growth will they yield, they hardly reach 3% growth. And for this country to get somewhere, we need 6%. So what's the use of elaborating on those inputs when they actually have such little impact relative to what the target is? What I'm saying is let's lift our gaze, look at the target, and pull South Africa in the direction of saying what will make the difference. Yeah. I mean, the president's speech and the Minister of Finance speech at best will give us 2.5% or 3% growth.
Yeah.
But in fact, by 2026, unemployment will be at 38% from 36%. And growth will be at about 1.2% or 1.6%. So the things that we are doing are so minimalist that they will not change the needle.
Is that not a start? Maybe we can start there and grow from there to 6%?
Well, you need to model and say by this period we'll reach 6%. Even if you say by 2040, say so. If there's evidence that there's a possibility. But you can't give us 3-cycle projections based on the CSG, the CSG model. You've got to say, what is this? To give country hope, you can't say by 2026, which is true, we'll grow only by 1.8%, but it is the policy, the set of policies and their configuration that is constraining us from growing the way we should grow. Credit extension, for instance, is so low. Government investment is so low, historically up to now. And there's no indication that these things will actually grow. So the policy posture doesn't give evidence and credibility that this country can grow because it is constrained from the word go. And West here, the benefits of growth, however small, will only go to business. The poor will remain where they are, and the constitutional promise will be failed. So I'm arguing that South Africa has to wake up and ask the difficult questions to the politics so that we can lead the change.
Dr. Lehohla, I hear you. Appreciate your time. Thank you so much for coming on and giving us that analysis. Former Statistician-General there, Dr. Pali Lehohla.